What was your experience like in the CBA as a coach? And what was it like in terms of the league and the players, how they use them, the imports, the foreigners? Because the CBA is like it's a destination spot, right? Below the NBA, there's really only probably the CBA and the EuroLeague, maybe the Spain ACB. There's a few leagues in a few countries that maybe are on par with China. So how was your experience in the CBA and how did you like it there?
Man, the CBA and just my experience in China in general was amazing. Those are 3 years of my life that I'm very grateful for. I'm grateful for life in general, but those were honestly some of the most trying times, right? It made me stronger. It exposed me to myself in areas where I needed to improve, but it also just made me understand like that there's basketball being played at a high level all around the world in places that you wouldn't really imagine. And so I started out as just a skill development or director of skill development for the Beijing Royal Fighters. I had to like really just work my ass off to even get that job. I originally, even before that, started with the Guangdong Tigers, just one of their coaches as an assistant during their preseason training camp in the mountains of Urumqi. And, going from that to then taking a job with Steph, it was like a whirlwind. I was basically just trying to figure it out as I went. We were an expansion team at the time in 2018 into 2019. So the management, they didn't even really know, all the different ways they needed to delegate roles and explain like what your job description was versus this guy's. So I was doing a lot, man. I was behind the bench for like the first 3 games. And then Steph and Jay Humphreys were like, nah, you need to come to the front of the bench because we need you to do X, Y, and Z and practice. I had to be on the court as a practice player. I had to cut film. I had to also like create a playbook, based off of everything that Steph was like throwing at the players every single practice. Had to translate it into Mandarin. I had to make sure that players had pregame warmups. I had to lead practices. I had to organize, shoot-arounds and transcribe notes from all of our film sessions. So it was a great experience from a coach's perspective because I didn't have a job description that you would typically have if you got an NBA job as a first-year coach, where they're like, you only do this. You sit right here. You don't say anything. You speak when spoken to, right? That's how a lot of guys are. They either start in like the film room or they're an ops guy and they have to, deal with luggage and travel accommodations. I had to do all of that plus some. So it was amazing because I got to develop so many relationships with the players, but I was also exposed to, like the harsh realities of the CBA. Like you get close to a player or you get close to a group of guys and then you realize like this is a real business. I had volunteered on the college level as a women's coach. I had coached on the high school level before. And then, of course, I had just done skill development stuff. So I never saw like people really getting cut or traded or released mid-season. We had maybe 3 players start training camp with us that didn't even go into the second or third game of the season with us, simply because preseason, our general managers and owners and head coaches and everybody, they were just like, nah, he's not the one. And I'm like, oh, wait, oh, okay. Like, it's not like, oh, you think he's going to figure it out or, we just need a few more practices. Nah, he ain't got it. Out of here. And then boom, it was like just the amount of, I don't even know the word to describe it, but I guess just cutthroat, like just how serious it was, right? It was about winning right now. It was not about like a 5-year or 10-year plan. That was a very like quick wake up call for me. But, I would compare it to like, any new thing that anybody out there watching this is embarking on, like whether you're a player or a coach, I think even if you're a first-year high school coach, it's probably a whirlwind. If you're a first-year college coach, right? So I definitely don't want to minimize anybody's experience. Of course, the culture there was amazing. Being exposed to the love, that's something that I think a lot of American players miss out on, is they think that this is like the highest level of like fan appreciation, support, and just connectivity with your community that you can ever, achieve or like experience. Overseas basketball is where it's at. Like the overseas soccer community is kind of like, the pantheon, like that's the top of the top as far as like seeing the fans go crazy over, their favorite players and teams. but the basketball kind of follows that trend. I mean, you got people in the stands with fireworks, you got people with blowhorns, you got all types of songs and chants going on. People are waving flags. We used to go to the airport and there would be people with like my picture on a cardboard cutout, and I'm an assistant coach. So what do you think they're doing for the players? Like, people would give us bouquets of roses, at the airports or at the train station when we're leaving the airport on the way to our team bus. Like, it was insane, so to play in a large market, organization within China, I guess it would be comparable to like being in a large market situation in the NBA. Like, Beijing was kind of like the New York Knicks, so to speak, and like Beijing, where I was, we were like the Brooklyn Nets, if that makes sense. So it's like that inner city kind of rivalry feel. But Stephon Marbury, what can I say? Like, that's like the Michael Jackson of China. You know what I mean? So just even being around him, that had an aura to itself. He was larger than life to the people there. So all of our games were like televised on like CCTV5 and CCTV5 Plus, which is like ESPN and ESPN Plus over there. We had great vets. My first year, Kyle Fogg, who's now a like 2 or 3-time champion with Lao Ning. Just being around him was a great experience for me as a young coach, also because although I'm older than him, he had been in the CBA so long that just watching his example of how he like dealt with his, Chinese teammates and the Chinese coaches, he knew the language enough to like make sure that he was professional at all times. He was marketable, but yet he was a dog on the court and he was a leader. He could put up with like being yelled at, held, accountable by the coaching staff, but still just like handle it all with grace. So that was amazing. Seeing people like Lance Stephenson over there my first year, he had just left the NBA and was over there in China, was an experience. OJ Mayo was in the CBA for the first time. There's so many others that I don't want to slight anybody, but it's definitely, like you said, a destination spot. I think most of the guys that are there have that NBA stamp, right? So they've already played at like a super high level, and then the guys that haven't, they've proven themselves in the EuroLeague. So it's not a place for your average rookie overseas player, right? Because the demands are so high. That's why the money is so high. But and then for coaches, anybody watching this, if you want to potentially coach overseas, even if it's not China, you got to have an open mind. You got to be willing to try new things. You got to be adaptable. You got to be sharp. You got to know your craft, right? Because at all times they're holding you in a high regard because they think you're an expert, and you should be if you were given the opportunity. And then you just have to be ready to work, especially in China. Like, that's what they believe in. That's what they stand on over there. So, there were a lot of weeks where it felt like they figured out a way to make it 8 days instead of 7. And, we would work every single one of them. But, when you win, they show an immense amount of appreciation, and they pay good. That's one reason why I wouldn't mind going back. Those bonuses, especially against your rival teams, were amazing. So good times.
Yeah, China is definitely an interesting market because when I would do coaching academies there or coaching camps there, I never coached professionally or anything like that, but I would do kind of youth academies in my off seasons. One thing I would always find is that the Chinese, they'll definitely work you, but they'll also take care of you if you do a good job. If you do a good job, they're definitely going to take care of you and they're going to hold you in high regard, just like you mentioned. And then you see that with a lot of NBA players now, former NBA players. That's why so many of them are going to China. It's also a shorter season. The salaries are insane there. We're talking about $1 million salaries or above for a lot of these players. So like we were mentioning, it is definitely like a destination spot.